Lincoln, I want to thank you for joining us tonight. The Four Seasons Garden Club, for the people who are here in person and those who will be listening a little bit later on our website, on our YouTube channel, I should say. We're so excited to have you, uh, and I wanted to note that I got to meet you many years ago and was so impressed about Forested, which is this experimental forest garden site. And with Lincoln's depth and breadth of knowledge, he does hold events regularly that are forest to table events, and he does other trainings. And I'm sure he'll tell us a little bit about that as he describes the way that he and his family live in the 10-acre urban ecosystem, forested ecosystem in an urban area. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Forrest to give his talk. Thank you.
Lincoln, yes, I get called Forrest a lot. No problem.
Yeah, sorry.
It's not the first time. Don't worry. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome. I can see some names. I love chatting with people. If anybody has questions at any point, please do feel free to jump in and ask any type of questions or introduce yourself and say what you're interested in, especially if we have a smaller group. That would allow us to just make sure that we're talking about, the aspects of this topic that are most interesting to you. So please do feel free. I was just going to, so I get, Olivia, you're seeing the screen that I'm sharing that has a picture of some kids? Is that true at this point?
Yes, sorry, it took me a second to unmute. I see the
Okay.
appropriate page, so it looks great.
Okay, great. Well, so yeah, I'll just go ahead and get started. I will say, yes, please at any time feel free. I see Brian and Kathy and Pika. Anybody can jump in at any time because otherwise I'm sort of just sitting here in my office talking to the screen, which is not tremendously interesting. But I know you're out there. So with food forests, which has been my great joy to pursue for the last 15 or 20 years, we're trying to restore a healthy forest ecosystem and also feed people and supply other things that people need, with the conviction that this is a forested region that we live in, so that the land produces forest if we leave it alone, and the forest is what provides all the ecosystem services that we need, like clean water and wildlife habitat and carbon sequestration and all that good stuff. But also that people historically, wherever we were living, we knew about how to make our living from where we were because we didn't have this global supply chain we could tap into. So this forest produces a lot of food, and we can move in a direction where we're getting the things that we need from thriving ecosystems rather than from other systems that we're currently relying on. So that's sort of the motivating reason for doing this. The places that we live tend to set back the forest somewhat, but there are ways to bring forest back in around the places that we live. And the places that we grow our food arguably have an even bigger impact on displacing ecosystems. Now we're super lucky to have the food coming off of these type of landscapes, because most likely nobody on the call has ever wondered whether they were going to have enough food for themselves or for their family for the winter. Winter's coming on. This could be a scary time at plenty of times during history, where it's like, well, is that little store of potatoes that we have, is it going to get us through? We have the privilege of never wondering that. I've never experienced that anyway. Maybe somebody has, but so we do have this amazing industrial food system, but it's displacing ecosystems at an almost unimaginably large scale at this point. So the next form of agriculture that we need to move toward is agroecology, where the lands that produce our food are also thriving ecosystems. And it's almost unimaginable sometimes because, we have this incredible industrialized system at vast scales, it's very hard to imagine bringing back the diversity to these landscapes and still deriving the kinds of yield that we need to sustain ourselves. But I believe it's possible, and I'll give you some examples of why I think that's true, even though we have a lot of things to work out to figure out how we're going to do that. So I don't know if anybody has questions or comments at this point, but feel free to jump in if you do. It's just a picture of our wonderful temperate forest. It was just Olivia and I were just remarking on how the word temperate is interesting, because it can be 100 degrees here in the summer and very humid for long periods of time, and then we head into this rather freezing period of time too. So, but here we are. This is the temperate region according to ecologists, and it does produce this rather stunning forest. This forest, by the way, produces way more biomass each year than any of our agricultural fields, even though we're hitting those fields with chemical fertilizers and irrigation and that sort of thing. This forest, just all by itself, with nobody doing anything for it, produces a huge amount of just raw net primary productivity, they call it in ecology, where it produces a huge amount of vegetative matter, which of course is a good sort of underlying proxy for how much ecosystem function is going on. But how can we get food from this system? You're going to hear a number of related terms. Sometimes people call what I'm doing a food forest. Sometimes they call it a forest garden. I quite like the word garden myself because it has these deep historical roots. And to me, that word has something in it about people, a balance, or seeking a balance between people and nature, between wildness and culture or order, orderliness as in human perception. Anyway, so I like the word forest garden a lot. But anyway, or agroforestry is another related practice. A little bit about my project, and then we'll get into some of the principles of doing this type of agriculture. I have these 10 acres that I started renting in Bowie, Maryland in 2012. And so we now have a young forest garden coming along that's starting to produce good crops. And the land was a cornfield before we started to develop the forest garden.
Lincoln, was it continuous corn or was it multi-cropped?
It was most recently corn and hay rotation. Actually,
Okay.
Immediately prior to when I began my lease, there was a section of the field that was in hay. And then prior to that, the best evidence is that, I mean, there are some barbed wire fences from about 100 years ago that you can find scraps of it back in the woods. So there is a wooded section of this property too, where the woods is about 100 years old. So it's second growth forest, but that used to be open pasture. So that was another historical land use. And then of course, tobacco, probably a lot of tobacco growing for as much as 200 years, maybe 300 years. So very beat up topsoil, like very low organic matter. You dig in the soil and it's, it's blonde color, like not much life there. When we began the project. So rebuilding the organic matter and growing plants that are tough and can handle that type of tough condition has been the beginning of the project for us. So we have a combination of our staff and volunteers that take care of the garden and for the most part, we take home the harvest for our families. We also put on farm to table or forest to table dinners for guests at these dinners that we hold at the garden and other events, brunches and stuff like that. A few examples of the type of produce that we grow on this slide. We grow shiitake mushrooms, which are wonderful in the shade. We get nettles. That's a very nice shade vegetable. Stings if you're incautious, but it's an incredibly nutritious and wonderful shade green. These are American hazelnuts down here. We do grow some apples. This is not necessarily a wonderful apple growing area, but our apples are very ugly. We don't spray. We do use some clay, a product called Surround, which is clay, on our apples. But so we get these ugly but delicious apples, various vegetables. There's a box of berries. I love berry season at the garden. We get so many berries, and it's really fun having groups of kids out there to eat those. So we do a lot of field trips and stuff. This is one of these dinners I was talking about. Just more flowers. So when people arrive for these dinners, people get a tour of the farm, and then our team starts bringing appetizers around, all of its stuff that's made from what's grown on site. With some exceptions, we buy a little dairy and salt and oil and stuff like that. But it's very, in large part, it's stuff that we grow in the forest garden. Always featuring mushrooms and acorn food. We produce a lot of acorn food because I think of acorns as being the most overlooked and like a huge potential for playing a role in our diet. This is acorn falafel. Our chef has probably made 30 different things out of acorn over the last 8 years or however long. Yeah, about 8 years that we've been doing the Forest Feast. And it's a wonderful, versatile food. It does need to be processed correctly to remove the tannin, but the quantity per acre and the nutritional profile and the fact that you can store acorns makes it an incredible food that's being offered by this ecosystem in great quantity. The Native Americans know how to use this food that the ecosystem is offering us. Other cultures around the world, Koreans use a lot of acorn food. In a lot of cases, what we're dealing with is really more of a cultural thing than a horticulture thing. It's that we live here and we have our preferences of what we want to eat that just don't have a whole lot to do with what the landscape is offering us here. So, but reconnecting people with this is so much fun. Like we get to make so many delicious kinds of food. Some of them challenging, it's challenging trying some new types of food, but it's great food too. So we need a culture shift, to move gradually in the direction of what our local ecosystems are offering. I saw somebody had a question and then it disappeared off my screen.
It's Kathy, and she wants to know, what about the acorn worms? How do you not have them ruin the stored acorns?
Yes, wonderful question. Briefly, if you dry acorns properly, they store for a good long time, especially if you get the right kind of acorn. Anything in the red family, and I especially like using northern red oak around here, stores beautifully. That's an acorn that in the natural course of things will fall on the ground and sit on the ground all winter and then germinate in the spring. Some of the white oak acorns, they want to germinate as soon as they fall in the fall. And so they're somewhat harder to preserve from rotting or being eaten by acorn weevils. But in general, it's a wonderful storage food. Many of the types of acorn are. And I have had some losses to weevils. So when you're going to harvest acorns, you do want to, like when you find like it's just a sea of acorns lying on the ground and you're going to harvest, you want to open up a good several of those acorns and see whether they're clean or whether they're very weevil eaten before you gather a whole lot of them, because the weevils move in waves like many things in nature. And so some batches are pretty weevil eaten and others are extremely clean. So I like to kind of move around until I find a really good batch where it's like at least 95% good acorns. And you can start to tell the difference too, even in a closed acorn nut. You can look at it and kind of see whether it's off color or looking nice and healthy as you're gathering. Just moving to a couple other examples of the types of food we do at our dinners that are fun. There's an acorn. This is a pawpaw bread on the right there. That's a passion flower. That's our native maypops, or it's a native passion flower, which is one of the most delicious edible flowers. That's just part of it. With hackberry ice cream and Chickasaw plum jam and acorn granola. So chef has lots of fun with all these crazy ingredients. The other thing that I get to do is design edible food forest parks around the DC region. Olivia, I actually didn't even, you had mentioned Texas. I was wondering if folks are mostly from around the DC region, or if this club is located elsewhere, or is everybody from around here or elsewhere?
It's mostly the Maryland, District of Columbia and Northern Virginia area, but if I've
Okay,
missed somebody's area, but that's typically the membership. So I think
gotcha.
they're familiar with the climate, but I was talking to people in New York today and they're expecting inches of rain. I'm sorry, not rain, of snow, and are excited about going skiing. So it's just
Yeah,
not that far north.
yeah. Yeah, bless them. I'm super excited that we're finally having rain. This has been one of the driest falls that I can remember. So yeah, we got a ways to catch up. Okay, so yeah, folks are local-ish, and we now have about 7 or so public food forest parks around the DC region that in various stages of development, but some of them are quite cool and fruitful at this point. So that's something that I get to do. My background is in landscape design. So I just eventually I took that in a direction of just focusing on food forests. Um, and that's been just a total joy. I love doing these things. Here's the Hyattsville team. This is in Hyattsville, Maryland. Um, Mayor Hollingsworth in the green jacket here. She had this vision and really helped shape my understanding of public food forests. Like she wanted public living rooms and food forests for in every ward of Hyattsville. We ended up doing 2 food forests, and she actually moved on to other things. But a wonderful leader in this, and helped me start to understand what is needed in a public food forest to serve the community as a little bit different than what you would have in a private backyard food forest. But anyway, it's been really fun. This is a nice major piece of green space in a neighborhood, and is producing a lot of fruit at this point. We also work a lot with urban forestry of DC under DDOT, and they find local site partners, whether it's a school or a park or other landscape. And we've been creating these food forests and taking care of them and educating people about what, doing cooking demonstrations or foraging walks and stuff like that to help people understand what they can forage in these local food forest parks, what they might like to be able to grow. Actually, when we're maintaining, a lot of times the plants start making babies and we can send plants home with people and stuff, and just trying to spread the practice of forest gardening and growing food in your local landscape as much as we can. So yeah, it can get hot and long sometimes during the summer, but there's just so much fun. It's just a blast, like giving people new fruits. Mulberries, we've already had a couple pictures of these. I love to highlight mulberries because it's a total weed. Some of you have probably tried mulberries. If you've had them and you think that they're a sort of a meh fruit, um, I encourage you to try some of the selected varieties, because the kids will have we'll have kids out during berry season, and they can try many different types of berries all on one day. So it'll be like blueberries, black raspberries, honeyberries, strawberries, bush cherry, maybe some of the early currants and stuff like that, and mulberries. And they consistently rank the mulberry as their favorite of all the berries. They like all of them. Most of the kids like most of the berries, but the mulberry is incredible. It just grows So it's a fast growing, incredibly prolific and abundant tree that anybody with any color of thumb can grow. So it's a neat resource for our area and really good for kids. It also dries really well. That's a cool thing. So you can shake the tree and you can shake down. We'll often get 15 or 20 pounds off of a single tree in one shaking, throw it all in the dehydrators and dry them down into these delicious mulberry raisins, basically. Somebody had asked another question. I'm just trying to find what are some of the plants in the public gardens and how are they different from? Yeah, so we, in terms of what we use, like the farm in Bowie, we will grow we'll try everything. Like if it's an edible plant, we will try growing it and see how it does. And we use that to try so for our educational stuff, we try to have, we have tours and workshops and stuff to just share what we're learning about what seems to grow well around here, what produces well, what people like to eat. And then when we're designing, we draw on that for planting in DC. That said, even from Bowie to DC and from site to site and soil to soil, it varies even within our region what does well. So any new food forest that I'm designing, I'll try to put in a lot of stuff that I am confident is going to do well as a few oddball things. Like there's this garden I might have some pictures of here called Langley Elementary School, which is by Harry Thomas Rec Center. So it's cool because you get the school community and the rec center community, like local neighborhood people coming together. And it's in this nice protected spot in DC, and the pomegranates are just growing great there and fruiting wonderfully. Where they won't, they'll sort of grow for me out in Bowie, but like not like that. It's just that much warmer inside of DC, and with the protection of that huge tall school building behind the forest garden. So it really is a little bit site by site, but we learn what we can out in Bowie and try and apply that on our other jobs. So yeah, bringing the kids through. If you want to stop by any of these gardens, you're welcome anytime. We're open on Fridays throughout the whole year, although during the winter we'll cancel some of our open garden days for weather. Like tomorrow we're not going. But June is early June is when we have a lot of field trips come through because of all the berries. I like this picture because this is my son several years ago. You get a lot of this, and more so with the adults, really, because when people are trying new foods. Okay, so like kids, they try new foods all the time. They, especially you think of like a baby who tries a food. Any food you put in the mouth is going to come back out again because the person has taste buds that are telling them this is a new food. Watch out. Maybe it's safe. Maybe it's not. And it takes work to learn to love a new food or a new type of produce. And so we try and guide people through that work, but kids are honestly more accustomed to it than grownups. So grownups are pretty set, kind of like music tastes. We develop our taste in music, and people are like, an adult will be like, I tried a persimmon fruit or whatever, and I don't like it. Period. End of story. It's like, that's not actually how it works. Like if you want to develop a taste for a new thing, you're going to have to work at it a little bit, and it is work, but it's worthwhile. And so I'd like to invite people into this. And some people are happy to try stuff, but it is, there's definitely going to be some things that don't appeal to you at first, and that's okay. And the panacea and the joy of creating forest gardens is represented, I think, very well in my daughter's illustration from one day when she was a kid, when I was making her help with a volunteer day when we were all planting in the food forest. So you can see how she felt about that experience. Anyway, so yeah, the human side, especially with the public food forests, there is, whether it's public or if you're just trying to negotiate with partners or or your other collaborators, I just like to give people a sense with food forests or even regular gardens. If you can push forward while having patience, that's a good place to be in, because most of these things have a long lead time of conversations. The garden in Bowie, I'm renting the land from the Washington New Church, and it took a year from the time that I first asked them, and the board was like, "Yeah, that sounds like a fun idea. What are you talking about? What's a food forest?" Um, it took a year of process and negotiating back and forth before I was finally allowed to break ground. So, and a lot of these public food forests can have a similar lead up, depending on how many stakeholders there are and how many agencies have to sign off on use of a particular piece of public land, and so you have to go and talk about it a lot. But what that generates is a lot of interesting conversations and a lot of visibility for the new project. So, I just like to encourage people that it's not wasted time when when having these meetings and talking with stakeholders. It's an opportunity to educate and to learn, and yet it can take a long time when you're just raring to, maybe you already like just ordered a bunch of plum trees and some pawpaws or whatever, just because, you're so excited. But the human piece of it is worth doing, and it takes what time it takes to play out. And then you do finally get to plant, which is a lot of fun. I have some duplicate slides in here. Sorry about that. All right. Just wanted to flip through a couple of examples, but once again, feel free to hit me with any questions if you have them along the way. These kids at the Montessori school there by Union Station, we established some wine cap mushroom growing beds with them. And this is, of all the mushrooms, I would say this is the easiest one to grow if you would like to start growing edible mushrooms. The technique, which you can see a little bit of in the picture on the upper left, is just to order your bag of spawn and then mix it up with some fresh wood chips and straw if you like. And then you just keep that wood chip bed moist and ideally in some amount of shade. And the mushroom will run all through that and then start to fruit. It's really fun. It's productive and delicious type of mushroom. So the kids were at Montessori. They're able to sell these to the parents at pickup time, and they got hundreds of pounds of mushrooms out of about 10 beds that we did within a fairly short amount of time. Like fall, we planted in fall, and they started harvesting in spring. So wine cap mushroom, also known as Stropharia, is a really cool mushroom to start growing if you're interested. Here's another site that we got to work on where initially meeting this site partner, we were offered a strip of land right under the shadow of the building that was about 10 feet wide. So very small. We could have grown some things there, but then eventually we identified this unused and erosive bank, which we were able to terrace and work into a food forest over time. So this one has been growing in for a while. It was quite an establishment period, because erosion is always a problem on steep bank or challenge. But eventually you can knit together a slope with native vegetation that does a great job of holding the soil. And at this point, we have a lot of fruit growing in there and native wildflowers. The flowers, since as long as an important principle of food forest is to grow not just the crops that you want to harvest, but also a diversity of support plants that help the whole system. And you can see a couple of them in this picture. The yellow flowers on the left are a plant called Maryland senna, and it's in the legume family, so it fixes nitrogen into the soil. And so it's a soil building plant. And also those flowers are loved by different pollinator insects. And so it's not something that we're going to harvest directly, but it is building up the soil, making the site richer over time, and more habitable for everything that lives there. On the right side of the screen, a little bit blurry, you can see an aster blooming there. And that's another important fall pollinator support. You see some little green there. That's one of my team members, Michael, gardening. And just a little bit upslope and behind him are a couple of bright green plants. Those are comfrey, which is another wonderful soil building and soil holding and weed suppressing plant. Very happy in the landscape. So we include a lot of things in. Some people refer to these types of plantings as plant guilds, where you don't just grow your fig tree, you grow or your plum tree, you grow your fruit, but you also grow things that are going to support it. This is that same site. Oh man, something that I've been really loving in the last few years are these jujube fruits. I don't know if anybody's ever had that. It's also called Chinese date. I wouldn't say it really especially tastes like a date, but it makes a very pleasant, fresh or dried fruit, and it grows pretty well. It's like a lot of fruit trees. It can be a good 5 years, maybe even 8 years until you start getting really good yields out of it. But then, it's good to go, and it'll give you a pretty good crop every year. Just really delightful fruit. This is that site that I was talking to you about that is very protected and warm. So the figs also have just done gloriously there. And a lot of these cool perennials. Thornless blackberry has done excellently on this site. I had mentioned to you persimmon fruit. I hope that a few of you, at least maybe all of you, have had a chance to try a persimmon. Persimmon is a group of fruits that is just a whole world unto itself that many Americans are completely unfamiliar with. And the crazy thing about it is that the American persimmon tree grows all over our region. At my site in Bowie, it pops up wild in the field with nobody planting it. I mean, actually the foxes plant the persimmon trees because they love the persimmon fruit. And then when the persimmon fruit is ripe, you find fox poops full of persimmon seeds everywhere. So they're helping. They're one of the whatever you would call it, dispersal vectors for persimmon trees. Anyway, it's incredibly well adapted to our region. We have the American persimmon, and then we have the Asian cousin, the Asian persimmon, same genus, different species. The Asian one is more developed. If you go in the grocery store and you find a persimmon fruit, it's probably Asian. But both American and Asian have tasty varieties, and they're incredibly well adapted and wonderful for our region. So I think it's really funny that your average person on the street does not know they exist. So we're trying to help change that because it's a really cool fruit. Another example of like fruit trees with pollinator support flowers there. This one is at a school called Capital City Public Charter School up in the northern, sort of near Tacoma Park. Let's see. I see that somebody has said something. I'm just going to pull up the comment if I can find it. Sorry. Some of our schools want us to grow persimmons for future distribution. What is a good intro variety? Yeah, great question. The Asian ones are easier to deal with than the American ones in general. I love the American persimmon, and there are selections that are wonderful and tasty. But I would say your very easiest one in terms of people eating it is going to be some of the non-astringent varieties. The persimmons, broadly speaking, are in two categories. They are astringent and non-astringent. The non-astringent ones you can eat when they're hard, like an apple. And a great one to try is one called the nickname for it, sort of, which you'll be able to find it if you Google it, is Ichi, ICHI. The full name is Ichiki Jiro. But that's a very nice non-astringent variety of persimmon. And then there are astringent varieties. That just means you have to wait. The fruit will be ripe and ready to eat when it's soft. And if you try to eat it underripe, it's very unpleasant. But if you eat it when it is ripe, it's incredible. And there's ways of drying them or freezing them or otherwise processing them to make sure the astringency is dealt with properly. But some of those varieties are absolutely wonderful too. One of the best ones is called Rosayanka, which is Rossesyanka. That is actually a hybrid between the American and the Asian persimmon. And I'm happy to share also, I keep a plants list of everything that we've tried at Forested. Well, I don't list everything we've tried. I list our favorite, like the things that we like best. There's about like 60 things on there so far. And I'm happy to share that. It's just a Google sheet. In fact, I could probably figure out how to put it in the chat right now. Let's see. I wonder if I should do that after. I can pull it up real quick here. Plants list. There it is. And find a chat. Pop it in there. Send. Okay. So that will hopefully pull up that plant list. It just, if we're jumping around during this presentation, mentioning a whole lot of different things, you can always go back to that. And feel free to follow up with me too if you have questions. Feel free to email me. Somebody said got several from Edible Landscapes. Also dug one up by the side of the Beltway, but it turned out to be a male. Yes, persimmons do come in male and female, so the males don't produce fruit. In general, in a lot of neighborhoods, you don't have to grow a male because there will be one near enough by. It's not a guarantee, but it's one of those things where you will need both to produce fruit. Will the pollinators still go to the Asian persimmon? Yes, we have not had any trouble with fruit set on the Asian persimmon. I will say one thing with those trees, which kind of caught me by surprise, is like any fruit tree, they take their sweet old time getting going, growing up for years. And then finally they make their first set of flowers and you get a couple of fruit maybe, and then maybe they make a few more flowers, make a big batch of fruit, and then they cast all that fruit, which is really annoying. Like it'll be, they'll be green and they'll be half-sized and then they all fall off the tree. This is very common with young persimmon trees. I guess the tree knows that it's not got the resources quite yet to ripen all that fruit. But then wait another year or two and you'll get these fully ripened harvests of persimmons. So it is a waiting game again sometimes, but they get there eventually, and then they can go for 50 or 100 years. Soggy day at the Cap City School. Here's a plant I absolutely love. Maybe some of you know it. We saw a picture of one of these flowers earlier. Every part of this plant, well, anyway, the leaves and the flowers and the fruit are all edible. And they're delightful. So it's a crazy sort of a vine called maypops. It's a native passion flower. And it will, you can see how it's covering this chain link fence around the tennis court at one of these schools. And I think it's great for that because it's going to die to the ground every year. I wouldn't recommend growing like a grapevine on a chain link fence like that because the grapevine trunk will get thicker and thicker from year to year and eventually strangle itself or start to rip apart the chain link fence. which is not what you want. But this thing, because it dies to the ground every year, is perfect for this type of application. You have some beauty, this wonderful scent of these flowers, and it's the flowers are sweet and like light and a little bit crunchy or whatever, wonderful to eat. The greens taste a little bit nutty and fresh and wonderful. And it grows so much, like you can harvest so much greens from this. And then finally the fruit, or that just delightful aromatic passion fruit. You open it up and it's got these weird looking cells inside and just this aroma of amazing tropical fruit, but it's native to here. And I highly recommend it. It's aggressive. You can look at it and see like that's a big, strong plant. I wouldn't plant it in your vegetable garden. I'd plant it more like where it can have room on a trellis. It's great for covering a trellis, but somewhere not too near to some little sensitive plants that you want to make sure are not swamped by a vine, because it is good at swamping things, if that makes sense. So one major principle of forest gardening is that we are trying to grow multiple different species together. I think you've probably gotten that idea from, so it's not a monoculture, and everybody can find their own balance that works for them and their landscape. But we don't grow, like, it doesn't look like a traditional orchard where it's just like a block of apple trees for acres and acres. We're trying to mimic the diversity of the forest, and so that makes it a little bit more complex to manage, for sure, and harder to mechanize if you were going to try and do that. So that's a major challenge with forest gardening becoming part of a major supplier of our food needs. But I think the forest works so well growing in polyculture that we need to be trying this. So we grow in layers because the forest, the forest is diverse because there are many different niches in the forest, like many different ways that plants can make their living and even benefit from growing near each other. So in this particular patch that we're looking at on this screen, you have, it's a young forest, but that the tree on the left is a pecan, and that's going to be a huge tree one day. Whereas the little Chickasaw plum that I've been mentioning on the right, that doesn't get a whole lot bigger than what it is now. So we're working toward vertical layering, where you have a taller tree bearing one crop way up high, and then another tree lower down growing another crop. And then underneath that plum tree, you can just barely see something called Missouri gooseberry, which is a neat local native gooseberry. And the green thing in the background is called high bush cranberry. So we're growing a diversity of different things together and trying to keep it just organized enough that we can keep track of it and harvest it when we need to, while still having a good amount of diversity in the landscape. Oops. Here are a couple of examples of soil building plants. If you have a landscape that has poor soil, I would definitely recommend bringing in compost and mulch and those kind of things that will build up the soil. But the plants themselves, there are plants that you can grow that do a great job of helping with that process too. And here are two really great ones. The red clover and partridge pea are both legumes, so they're fixing nitrogen in the soil. They are fertilizer plants, and they love bright sunlight and poor soil. They have a job to do. They're pioneer. They're what ecologists call pioneer plants. They can get into a poor soil situation. Some of these type of plants can even grow like right into the cracks in a parking lot, or a bare gravel yard, or a slag heap by a mine. There's some plants whose job it is to take over those type of things and start to build it back into a forest. They're the very first step on a long process. And so these things are very important in poor soil areas at the beginning of the journey, and they'll help build up the soil. And then once your fruit trees get a little bit bigger, or your nut trees, etc., and cast a little shade, these things will fade away. They've done their job. The soil has been improved. And once they've added that fertility to the soil, it doesn't easily leave the system. That's an important thing to understand, that if you're keeping the land covered with vegetation rather than clear off the vegetation and till it and plow it every year, plowing and plowing and plowing for hundreds of years, you lose such a huge bank of fertility that was in the topsoil, and that takes a long time to build back. But land that is covered with a diversity of different vegetation tends to hang on to the nutrients rather than releasing them all into the water, and that fertility becoming a pollution in our waterways from too much tilling. Instead, the fertility remains on the landscape and is cycled. So that when these plants die to the ground every winter, they add to the soil, they feed the soil microbes, and then those feed back into the trees. We are part of that, though, so we should be returning our wastes to the landscape in as sustainable a way as we can. That means composting. It even means I am very into the composting of human waste, human manure, which is a whole thing. But that we have human manure toilets out at the forest garden, which work beautifully. We compost all of that with a special, careful system and return it to the soil. Because if you're just taking nutrients out of the landscape every year and then flushing those down to down the toilet and taking them out of the system, that's not sustainable in the long term. Here's another couple of really neat native support plants. The one on the right is another legume. This one is a bush called false indigo. And the one on the left is an early spring support for native bees called nine bark. Also just a cool ornamental, that nine bark. There's a purple leafed version that you may have seen. Bristly locust is another cool one. Another legume there to build up soil. It has these really amazing red seed pods followed by an edible pink flower that's really delightful. If you probably see the black locust blooming all around in the spring. I don't know if any of you know that plant, but those flowers are super nice to eat. You can't eat any other part of locusts, but the flowers themselves are excellent. And you can really taste in the flower how it is related to things like sweet peas, because the flowers taste a lot that way, but with that sort of floral sweetness to them. So I really love some of these native nitrogen fixers. It's quite amazing, and you since you all are a garden club, I'm sure this is not a surprise to you, but the greater the diversity of plants that you have, especially native plants in the landscape, the greater the diversity of insects that will also come into that landscape. And then, of course, the bird population appreciates as large a diversity of insects as possible because they need that for their food at different times of year. So, nectar is a very important aspect of the landscape, but also the leaves of the plants support different types of butterfly and moth larvae and different type of native bees that are specialized. There tend to be, for every native plant, there tends to be some certain insects that are specialized to eat only that. It's pretty amazing. The classic example is, of course, the monarch butterfly's larvae can only eat milkweed. Another one is like pawpaw. Pawpaw is the host plant for a beautiful butterfly called zebra swallowtail. The zebra swallowtail caterpillars can only eat pawpaw leaves. They can't eat anything else. And this is true of 90% of all butterflies and moths. They only have one larval food, like only one leaf type that the caterpillars can eat. Whereas nectaring tends to be a little bit more generalized. There's some carpenter bees, I believe, enjoying the celosia. Here's another plant that we have in the forest garden that we do not eat because, it's not edible for people, but it's an important wintertime bird food. And we do want to keep as many birds in the garden as we can because they do help you with your pests. These are all photos that were taken in the garden in Bowie. The bluebirds were there before we started the project, but the indigo buntings came in after we started to establish a more diverse landscape of the kind that they prefer, with really good, bug diversity, etc. So that's fun. My one friend has a good long zoom lens and takes these cool bird pictures. The one on the right I took, so not as great, but it is cool that if you provide the habitat for hummingbirds, like all those red trumpet shaped flowers, like the red honeysuckle, the native coral honeysuckle, hummingbirds will be around, but actually a lot of their diet is insects, not just nectar. So if you give them the nectar, they'll help you out by eating some of your bugs. There's another really cool example to me anyway. This is blue-winged wasp nectaring on goldenrod. It prefers and needs certain plants for its nectar source as an adult. It like things in the goldenrod and mint family are its nectar source. So the adult form of the insect, like we're looking at here, is a nectar eater. But then it's going to go and mate, and then it finds a Japanese beetle larva and lays its eggs into the Japanese beetle larva, and the wasp larva consumes the Japanese beetle, which is gross, but it is very helpful. So, and if you don't have a population of this nectar source, this goldenrod flower, you won't have a population of blue-winged wasp in your landscape, and the assistance that it provides with Japanese beetle. Another kind of cool note on that is that this is a specialized predator whose prey typically is one of our native beetles or a set of our native beetles. But after a few hundred years of the Japanese beetle being present in the American landscape since it was introduced, this native wasp has adapted to prey on this introduced pest. So that'll be part of bringing things back into balance, which is cool to see. It can take a very long time, doesn't work with all invasive species in that way, or necessarily on a convenient time frame, but it can happen. Anybody have any? I've been talking a lot about these bugs and flowers and support plants. Anybody have any questions about that at this point? I'm starting to talk myself hoarse here. All right.
I have a question, but not on the bugs.
Yeah, go ahead.
That's about the humanure treatment
Yeah.
they do. In particular, I'm concerned when we do humanure type treatments is like antibiotics or other medications the person might be consuming, and how you can obviously filter those out.
Yeah, it's a great point. Some pharmaceuticals are persistent. The Humanure Handbook by Joe Jenkins is very useful as a resource and includes some information about that. Okay. I will say, in terms of, so we live in an artificial environment in many ways, and we are exposed to we're exposed to all sorts of man-made products. And so each of us has to decide what we're willing to use. And for me, I think that a well-composted humanure that is added to the soil, even if it does contain some pharmaceuticals that a person has taken in, is a better use of, it's a better flow than putting that into clean water in our toilets and then flushing it down to a sophisticated wastewater treatment plant like Blue Plains, and then they struggle to. I mean, they claim that their products are safe, and they probably are, but to me, it feels better to carefully compost. And I don't use the compost that we produce from that system in the vegetable gardens, although people claim that you can. I put this compost around fruit trees This is a 2-year composting process, and it smells like perfectly wonderful regular compost by the time it's done, as crazy as that sounds. And German studies have shown that they grew different crops in known contaminated soils. So, and I think this was mostly with regard to heavy metals, but they grew vegetables, mushrooms, and fruits in like lead contaminated soils. And they found that the green vegetables that they were growing and the mushrooms were contaminated with lead, but the fruit was not, because fruit trees, for whatever reason, if they're growing in the contamination, they don't tend to pass that soil constituent into their fruit or into nuts in the case of nut trees. So I don't know. I couldn't tell you whether pharmaceuticals would be passed into the fruit system, or whether the digestive activity of a healthy soil would eventually deal with them, or which ones. But to me, it's a cost worth paying. We're putting these things into our bodies anyway. I think we need to return them to the soil in the most responsible way we can. But it is a compromise for sure.
Yeah, and I've been using Bloom soil and looking at their studies and research. But again, just like you, not directly in vegetable beds, but around woody plants.
Yeah.
Just to be super cautious.
Yep. I'm glad they're doing it. I mean, Blue Plains is kind of the high tech version of this.
The industrial side version. Olivia has a question for you in the chat, and I see some other insect ones in the chat too.
Okay, let's see. That wasp flocks to the mountain mint here. We have lots of goldenrod too. Yes, totally. Yep. Fun thing about mountain mint, which you may have heard, Penn State studied a whole bunch of native perennials, and they counted how many different species of insect were nectaring on each one, and mountain mint was the top one from that study, in terms of like the diversity of different insects that were using that. Question on bugs. What might prey on CM bark scale? Granted, neither food plant nor native. I'm trying to guess what CM means. I'm not thinking of it right now. I'm feeling dumb. Crepe myrtle. Is it crepe myrtle? Is that what we're asking about? Kate?
Hand on mute. Yes, this is Kate. And sorry, it's crepe myrtle bark scale, which is rampant in backyards, and hanging on the human manure that you're talking about. Huge amounts of long-lasting pesticides are being used on the trees in order to make them toxic to the scale. And wondering if, and that's going to contaminate the city, because I live in DC. There's like at least 10 per block here of crepe myrtle trees.
Yes.
And all of them, there was one left standing, but now all of them on my block have scale. So I'm thinking, well, plant, good flowers to attract the, like goldenrod, and attract chickadees and all the little birds that eat tiny things like scale and stay around over winter, and attract hummingbirds. But that's just kind of trying not to drown in the pond. I'm not saying it's proven.
Yeah.
Just splashing around. Do you have anything that you have noticed consumes native scale with great carefree abandon?
I don't have a good answer for you on that, although I think it's a wonderful question. I would say, I'm so sick of crepe myrtles myself. I mean, they're beautiful. They bloom forever, and they come in every size and color. But there's so many wonderful native trees that I'd rather see. That said, that product that I mentioned, Surround, which is just kale and clay, It works really well. Because we grow such a diversity of different crops, we can't do a tailored custom spray for every single thing, but we'll spray it on our apples and pears and some of our stone fruits. And it deals with a lot of insect damage. So that might be worth trying. Yeah. And just getting the insect diversity up in your area, you have a chance that something will prey upon the scale. Sorry, I can't give you a better answer than that, though.
That's okay. I don't have any crepe myrtle, but they're very popular trees.
Yeah, and people are, I kind of understand the desperation. If you've been investing in something, they'll just reach for the chemicals and douse everything, but it has a high cost, and I think it's unnecessary. We're using so much Roundup, for example, right now, it is not as harmless as the companies were claiming for a long time. Even wheat, like you'll see wheat fields where around here where the whole field is golden brown, except for the edges are green, like in the ditches around. It's because they spray the whole wheat field with Roundup to kill the grasses and let the grain dry on the grass, so it's easier to harvest. Anyway, we're choosing to use a lot of this stuff, and I wish we wouldn't.
Thank you.
I appreciate that. Can you just respond to a couple more of the questions in the chat? We are at about 7:30, and I just want to respect people's time.
Sure. Yep. How do we deal with deer? Yes, deer are they're our problem. I have a deer fence around my place. And if any of you are considering deer exclosure, I would be happy to chat with you, because I've tried a whole lot of different systems and I have opinions about what are the better systems and what are not as good, what are cost effective. There are some plants that deer won't eat, but the list is fairly short. I have had some success with individual deer guards if you don't want to go as far as fencing a whole property. Yes, crepe myrtles are tough plants, and they are beautiful. So I don't want to be a total crank about them. I just, at my old landscape design office, we specified so many crepe myrtles, and I would send around flyers about, hey, consider the native sourwood, consider black gum or whatever, and it always came back to crepe myrtles. So I became a little bit sour on them for a while, but they are a beautiful plant for sure. All right. Well, if we're out of time, I'm happy to chat with anybody who has any further questions. But meanwhile, I'll just say thanks for having me. And please come visit us in Bowie sometime if you like. We'll have our next forest dinner most likely in June. And we're open every Friday if you want to come on out here. It's still beautiful in the wintertime, just not very many berries to graze on. So love to see you out in Bowie sometime if you like.
Well, Lincoln, we really appreciate your coming and speaking to us tonight, and I especially like your whole ecosystem focus. So this is important, that you've got both the plant and the people community all in balance here. So thank you so much for your time tonight, and everyone knows where you are, and we will follow up. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. It's good to meet you.